in a reading nook.
Yeah. And now I'm in
Two books.
a Lego-filled hovel, basically with no furniture. But anyway, I'm in London, and you're in Glasgow.
Glasgow.
So
Sun-soaked Glasgow.
glamorous Glasgow. I wanted to ask. Let's get like straight into talking about it because the Last Dead is set in Glasgow, and I'm really interested in writing about the place where you live and how you feel about that. Like, do you feel a tiny bit self-conscious about writing about it because people who know you will think you're writing about them?
I think people think that anyway. So at the times when I've not written about Glasgow, people think, but people, I don't know if you find this, people always think they're the baddie. No one ever says, the really nice character that saved everybody. No one thinks they're the hero either. But people always think they're the bad guy. But I don't actually, because Glasgow is so unknown, and it's not described very well by people. So it's actually a really beautiful Gothic Victorian city. And very few people kind of realise that, and it's a very, very middle class city in the centre. Lots of people don't know that. And it's also a bit of a hipster city too. And but the thing is, everyone who's Glaswegian goes. I mean, I think this happens with Irish people as well. As soon as they step outside Glasgow, they thicken their accent and then pretend they've boxed their way out of the ghetto, and they really haven't.
I can't get away with that. Like I'm a Dubliner and a North Sider, but you would never, I think, guess to hear me. I don't think many people would buy that. Um, I find it like it's like a character in the book Glasgow, and I think it's a little bit overshadowed at times by Edinburgh, and I think people are more familiar with Edinburgh who haven't, who don't know Scotland very well. But like you really feel like you're moving through the city reading The Last Dead, that you sort of have a really strong sense of all the different areas. Did you sort of think about readers who hadn't been to Glasgow and trying to kind of put it in context for them? Because if you say Westminster, people kind of know what you
Mm.
mean, or.
Well, who do you imagine reading your books? That's such an interesting question, because I imagine maybe six other Denises reading my books. Really don't imagine people who don't really know my world or share my value system. I think I write very unself-consciously, and I don't really imagine an audience when I'm writing. And I know some people always have an imagined audience. I have the critical committee on my shoulder telling me everything's rubbish, but I don't really imagine other people reading. And I've made friends with readers who are not people I would have thought I had anything in common with, because they read my books and they really got my books, and it turned out we had loads of common ground. But who do you imagine reading your books? Do you when you're writing them?
I'm a little bit scarred, I think, that by having I had very nice American publishers who I like, they were lovely. But I remember writing a book that was set in Wimbledon, which is kind of on the outskirts of London, and the cover that they did had Big Ben on it with a view from the house of like the centre of London. And it made me really like think, well, even though I think this is all very obvious and familiar, maybe I need to build in a bit more explanation of things. And I mean, I've slightly given up on readers because um, sometimes I just find that they read into the books, things that I never intended them to read into. I was talking to a friend of mine who is a lesbian, and she said, "I think your main character is a lesbian, and she just doesn't know it yet." And I was like, "I don't think she is, but maybe that's how it comes across to you." So I'm a bit like, I try not to think about them too much, but I'm also very much aware that you can't take anything for granted when you.
See, that original intention thing, that's so interesting for a writer, because I think we imagine books as I write it and then you're allowed to see it. But actually, the book happens halfway between the reader and the writer, because they're
Absolutely.
reading it through the prism of their experience. So I've read books that were trashy, because I will read anything. I mean, literally, I will read anything. And I've read really trashy true crime books that were quite kind of, they had the depth of Dostoevsky, some of them, because there was one particular, and it was a ghostwriter interviewing someone but writing it in the first person, and he despised this guy that he was ghostwriting for, and he'd
Really?
always, yeah, but it had so much depth, this whole book. And I realized that it was me as a reader bringing that interpretation to the book. And like that, sometimes people have said, obviously, this is what you meant in your book. And sometimes it's been much fancier than what I actually meant. So I've just said yes.
That's something to learn, isn't it? That you learn to kind of go, that's right.
Oh,
That's
yeah. Well,
really,
yes, it
really
is.
right.
But the thing is, it is right because every book is a different book every time someone reads it. And readers assume, and I used to write comics, and I think one of the reasons comic book readers are so crazy, and we are crazy, is because they're so invested in making the comic happen as they read it, because it's working so many different parts of your brain. Like there's a bit in Pepys's diaries, and he right at the very beginning, and he says, I think it's like I can't remember which Shakespeare play it is. Say it's like Troilus and Cressida, and he says, I bought that in St Paul's courtyard, and I read it, and then I went to see it on stage, and the book was much better actually. Because you're so much more invested than if you're watching a play or a film of it, and like comic books, you're extra invested because you've done so much of the work.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
yeah.
that's
So,
true. I think
so
we do.
Maeve is lesbian then in your friend's world.
For her, yeah, for her,
Yeah.
that would solve all her problems, which I find really interesting. Like that's her kind of, well, this is where this is going. I can see where it's going to end up. So it's just a real kind of like, okay, well, maybe let's not rule anything out kind of moment. And I wanted to ask you about true crime actually, because you have written a few novels now that have kind of a germ of true crime in them, or that I mean, you wrote the amazing The Long Drop, which is based on a true story, and The Less Dead is based on true crime. And how do you I just thought it was really interesting that you have a true crime author in The Less Dead, and he's one of the most obnoxious characters I think I've ever read in anything. He's fantastic, like he's brilliantly awful. But then I was wondering, do you sort of is that a little bit of tension in how you feel about it coming out, or
Well, do you find him attractive though?
no? He made my skin crawl to
Oh,
be honest.
did he? Oh, that's a shame because he's supposed to be quite attractive.
I mean,
Well,
that's me. That is me because I'm kind of immune to authors.
maybe. Um, well, I really wanted to talk, but the thing is, you've written a true crime book, really, because your last book was based on a true crime, wasn't it?
It was absolutely, yeah. I think we all probably scavenge through
So that's it. See, that's so interesting. So why is there this distinction as if it's a real distinction? Because almost all of my books have the germ of real crime in it, or some incident I've heard that's really stuck in my head, or something a police officer's told me that I couldn't stop thinking about. Um, and in Jack Robertson, who's the character in The Less Dead, I really wanted to think about the ethics of true crime, because this Margot Dunlop is a doctor, and she goes to an adoption agency and she to meet her birth family, and it turns out her birth mother, like Vanessa was saying, was a street sex worker in Glasgow in the 80s, and she was murdered. And there were a series of murders of Glasgow sex workers at that time. And the very last one who died, it was like 10 women or something. And the very last woman who died was very, very sympathetic, and she came from a really lovely family. And they were on Crime Watch, and the police made a big effort. They did a terrible job, but they made a big effort, and it really made me think: what about those women that went before? And a lot of those women, some of them I knew, because Glasgow's very small, but some of them grew up in care and didn't have lovely families to go on Crime Watch for them. And some of them were just really unsympathetic. And one of them in particular I knew was quite a violent drug dealer. But she was she was like 4'5" or something like that. I mean, she wasn't that, but she was a known character anyway. And you just thought, do you have to be sympathetic for your murder to matter? So I wanted to write this story for a really long time. And I went to see the police officer who investigated this, and this started off as a true crime book. And she said, you can't write it as a true crime book. She said, those women were exploited from the minute they were born, and you writing this and using their names will exploit them further. I wasn't sure if she was right, but I thought there was a chance she was right. So I thought, well, I need to really fictionalize it. And it just really got me thinking about the ethics of writing true crime, of where the lines are. Do you know what I mean? Because it's true crime's such a big thing now. And Peter Sutcliffe died this week. And one of the things that one of the really interesting things, the vying front pages of the papers, some of them had Sutcliffe, some of them had all the women that Sutcliffe killed or attacked. And I mean, that is a seismic change in social attitudes to victims. And I just think it's such an interesting world, and it's such to unpack that and look at that, because for some crime writers, fiction is fine. There's no trouble there. But true crime is somehow low class and dirty and exploitative or voyeuristic or whatever. I just think these distinctions are so interesting, like when I was researching The Long Drop, one of the big questions was, why are women interested in true crime? And we're still asking, and that was in the 50s in the newspapers, and we're still asking that question today. Why are women so interested in crime? Because I bet you the vast majority of people who buy crime fiction are female.
Oh,
Do you find, yeah, do you find your audience is mostly female?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think in Ireland, especially the last sort of 10 years, there's been a huge growth in women writing crime fiction,
Yeah.
which hadn't been there before. Like women
All
have
right.
been writing romantic novels, and there was quite a nice little group of men who were writing crime, and it was all very kind of hard edge and gangster based and what have you. And then suddenly, I think women kind of found their voice to write about, which is like interesting in its own way. But I think, like with true crime, I'm really interested in how publishers are a little bit ashamed of it.
Mm.
Even a really brilliantly written true crime book will be published with a kind of a very down market look, and it will you kind of don't want to be seen reading it. But it can be a brilliant book inside the covers, but they just, I don't know. There is that feeling, I think, that this is something that's a little bit down market, or that slightly prurient, that we're interested in it. And when you pass it through a filter of fiction, I think especially when you write as well as you do, like your writing is just, I am such a fan.
Oh, that's so nice.
I think that makes a huge difference, because it has that sort of, you get an insight into what has happened, and it's fictionalized, so you don't feel like you're kind of peering in and watching someone being stabbed, or left lying on a rug in the gaze of the police and everything else, which is of course what happens in The Less Dead. We haven't talked about the title, The Less Dead, and I think it's such a good title. Can you explain why you called it that?
Well, it's a term that refers to people, the sort of stratification of victims, and why some victims matter more than others. So the Staunch Prize was established about 3 years ago, and it was for thrillers that have stories that don't centre around a young woman being violently attacked and murdered. And because the people who established it had noticed that in crime fiction, that tends to be the dominant story, and we need to change that. And I thought that was asking the right question, but arriving at the wrong answer, because the problem really isn't crime fiction. The problem is that's who we as a culture are interested in, is 17-year-old blonde girls from middle class backgrounds who are white. And the term "the less dead" is a term used to describe victims who seem to matter less. So in the real world, that would be women of color or homeless people. And in New York, they used to mark files. When New York was really crazy in the 70s and 80s, the cops used to mark files, no humans involved. And that meant they didn't really, if it was a street person who got murdered or a sex worker who got murdered, and it meant they didn't really have to investigate or find the perpetrator. There's a serial killer who's just sort of been discovered in the States, and his name's Samuel Little, and he killed street working women of colour. And so nobody noticed. He's killed about 100 women. Nobody noticed because they were not looking after these women. And as a lot of the sex workers that I interviewed said, if they cared about us, they could stop it. They could develop the ability to investigate these things, and they could stop it spilling into populations that they actually care about. you know. So the term "the less dead" is people who die and no one really cares about them, and because they're dead, but they're slightly less dead than if it was a vicar's daughter or something like that. You know, and but I mean, I think it is something that, you know, in the year of Black Lives Matter, it's something we really need to think about as a culture. How do we stratify, you know, who matters to us, you know? Yeah, anyway, so that's basically the title.
I mean, I'm not a huge believer in the Staunch Prize. Like, I think it's an interesting idea,
Yeah.
but I feel it lumps everyone who's writing about women into one kind of box, and people who are taking advantage of the fact that women are victims of crime, or basically to kind of write something gory and graphic and what have you. And like, you know, I mean, I've written I don't think any of my books would qualify for submission to this
Yeah.
prize, but I'm really interested in violence against women, not because I think it's glamorous or because I think this will something that readers will want to read about, but I'm really interested in the same thing that sort of drives the less dead, which is that very ordinary men can do absolutely terrible things. And I think that's something that I'm really conscious of, and maybe I want to put that in my fiction. And I mean, is that something for you as well?
Well, it's an interesting thing because I would lump you in with me and a whole lot of other women, and it is no one has noticed that there has been a revolution in crime fiction writing. We are part of a revolution, or you know, a movement of feminist crime fiction, of women writing these stories for women, pulling it apart and looking at society at its most fractured, because those junctures between justice and police and population and class, looking at all those things is what our generation of women are writing. And no one has noticed that Sarah Paretsky started it and then we all joined in, and it's very, very political, and no one's noticed that. Do you know what I mean? It's just so weird. But when you're talking about, you know, the sort of low art aspect of true crime, I mean, I remember when crime fiction was low art and people would be quite ashamed of reading crime fiction. And that, to be honest, is why I wrote crime fiction, because I was writing a really kind of boring abstract PhD that I thought was full of these really revolutionary ideas about, you know, social construction of mental illness categories with women and gender and all this kind of thing. And I thought, if you put this in a really trashy chase about crime fiction book, you could get those ideas out there, and it would disseminate these ideas much more effectively than if you wrote them in a thesis and it sat on someone's shelf for the rest of your life. But then over the course of about 10 years, crime fiction became really respectable, and people started sending me their PhDs, and I'm like, I don't want your PhD. I don't want my own PhD.
Actually, I was going to ask you, did you ever finish your PhD?
No.
And no intention of going back to do it?
I got stuck in a kind of Derridian languages not fixed bubble, and I just could not get out of it. But I tell you, if you feel you have writer's block, try and write an academic paper, because it is like swimming in a concrete leotard. And then when you start writing fiction, you're just kind of like, I'll just have someone come in there. I don't have to go off and, you know, listen to housing officers talk about their clients for 4 weeks.
So I do sometimes find like my first draft can be a little bit like that. Like, I'll suddenly discover I've written 40 pages of someone trying to get out of a car, you know, and being in this never-ending dialogue. Yeah, sometimes.
You know, in The Less Dead, it starts with her in the room, but in the first draft, she took 30 pages to walk up the stairs. And she was sweating so much that by the end, I thought she would be dehydrated if she was sweating this much.
I do something like, I worry about my character's well-being. Like, have they had anything to drink today?
Yeah.
Did I feed them? Are they okay? Like, are they slept in about 25 hours? Maybe I need to build in some time for them to.
Do you have kids?
Yes, I do.
Right, because I'm always really worried during thrillers or James Bond books or whatever, and I'm thinking, this fella needs a sleep. No one ever goes for a wee sleep. I wrote a book called Conviction, and at one point the character actually says, I think you may have noticed that no one's had any sleep in this book because they've just been running around for like 4 days or something.
Getting progressively madder.
Yeah, making worse and worse decisions and just shooting at people.
I mean, it can be good. Like sometimes it's really useful to have characters who are grumpy and sick and hungry and tired, and just to put them under that kind of pressure. But there are times that I suddenly think, oh yeah, no, we didn't have any meal breaks here. Like maybe I'll just quickly put in an unpalatable meal that they have to eat in the car, or another cup of coffee. These are the things that I'm always really amused. I don't know if you get this because I think your characters are so complicated, and not complicated, that's the wrong word. I think complex is what I mean. They're not very straightforward and likable, but they're not likable. Like they are a really human mixture of kind of good qualities and bad qualities. So in this book, you have Lila, who's the heroine's best friend, and she's kind of disastrous, but she's also amazing.
Mm.
And I was reading it and thinking, she's making these terrible decisions for herself, but she's also doing all these brilliant things for her friend. And I love that kind of that mixture of things. But do you get editorial notes about your characters and how likable they are, or
No, but I often have people that are interviewing me or cheering me who say I really didn't like her, and it's always men. And this, yeah, and it's not always Lila. It's sort of like like the central character in Conviction. I really didn't like her, and but I mean, I used to read a lot of crime fiction and it was women who were great at running. They had big boobs. Everyone stopped talking and listened to them. They had drove a boss car. They had everything. They were even good at cooking. And I just hated them, and I just wanted them to die. I just kept hoping the serial killer would kill them. Because I'm not terribly interested in absolutely, those are not the people that I'm drawn to. And Lila really, and Margot in this book represents the feminist movement, and it was a big thing in the feminist movement was street sex workers were going to be people we would help, and they were not people we would listen to or facilitate or keep safe at that time. They were people that we were going to go and help, like walking in with a basket of scones or something. And those women could have eaten us and we were not listening to them. And Lila represents the friend who gets into terrible relationships, and all I have to offer is he will hit you again. What else can I, how can I support Lila in making it? Because autonomy and freedom is the right to make bad decisions. So how can we actually support one another while other people arrive at the conclusion that yes, he is a bad guy and he will, hit me again. But just because I was very aware that if you're saying to people he's going to do that again, they then can't say to you, he is hitting me, but I still want to stay with him. Do you know what I mean? It's just like that complexity, and she's just like a total messy hot bitch, and I just wanted to sort of represent that. And I mean, I'm very much the friend who says, the thing that means that you can't then speak to me, and I'm trying to soften as I get older and actually listen to people instead of going about making declarations and pointing in people's faces.
I mean, that's the thing. It seems so straightforward from the outside, but when
Yeah.
you're in that kind of relationship, I think it's so much more complicated. And again, it's coming back to that idea of the perfect victim who behaves perfectly and
Mm.
does put their hand up the first time that they get hit or that something happens that they don't like, and says, no, this isn't going to happen to me. I'm different and I'm special. And I love that it was so complicated and that you're kind of screaming at her to do different things maybe with her life. But yeah, I mean, but I think Margot also has this thing where she has the way the book is balanced. You have all these awful men, and then you have her partner or her ex-partner. And I just wondered, was that deliberate to kind of balance it out a little bit with somebody who was, a very different type of man?
Um, no, but I think it was an attempt to sort of talk about gendered roles, because he is very much, he's a good person and he's quite passive and he's quite kind of childlike, and it was too. He wasn't there as a trope, really. He just sort of developed kind of quite slowly. But I think her brother, I really like her brother, and I think her brother is the sibling that you don't have much in common with, but who is always there to do the right thing, which I think is not uncommon. Do you know what I mean? We hear about siblings who have tons in common. Um, and I mean, I think you know the very. I think when you're pregnant, very first pregnant, you're doing something really primordial, which is you're making sure your partner is not going to eat the babies when they arrive. And that period doesn't get talked about, and those little love tests. And I watched all my girlfriends doing it with their husbands, little love tests of, like put two marshmallows out and see if he eats the one shaped like a baby.
How do you really feel about this? Are you just pretending to be happy?
Yeah. And you are just making sure it's safe. It's not that you might be financially independent. You're not relying on. It's not fraught in any way, but it is quite. You do. You are testing each other, and it's quite a testing time, I think, in a relationship, and really interesting, because it's not volitional. I don't think it's that Joe isn't reliable or anything like that. She's just thinking, do I want to go through the 20 years of you being a bit childish with me? Do you know what I mean? It's quite a strange kind of thing, and because it is an option for a lot of women now, you're not stuck with someone as soon as you get up the duff. I mean, for me, somebody once said, what's the scariest horror film you've ever seen? And for me, it was Taste of Honey, because as a young as a young girl, that was like, oh my god, you just have sex once and your life is over. It was just I've never been as scared of anything.
That's definitely how the nun sold it to us. That was like, this is definitely going to happen to you.
You're just dead. You're 17 and you're dead, and you have to live with your mum.
Forget it. Yeah, it's all ruined. You've screwed it. I mean, I think because Margot is adopted, obviously that's like, for an author, that just leads you to so many potential outcomes for the character. And I love the idea that you have this splinter Margot going through the book, who's like, well, if things hadn't turned out the way they did, what would she have become, and would she have become the person she was? And like, is identity a big thing for you? That kind of nature and nurture.
Well, I have a lot of cousins who were adopted, and I have cousins who got in touch with their birth family, this generation, and it's like the last 10 years or so, and it was so interesting. Sometimes it works out really well getting in touch again, and one person's birth mother is basically joined our family. She's moved up to live near us now, and she's part of our family now. She was a shoe-in. I mean, she actually lived like 4 miles from us. She could be a cousin some way down the line. Do you know what I mean? Because she's so much our kind of person. It's quite weird. And then other times it didn't work out, but it was so random and it wasn't dependent on the person. And it really made me think about, choosing your identity, because one particular cousin is incredibly talented he's a musician. He's amazing. He's an amazing musician. And he's adopted, and we always assumed that he must come from a musical family. And then he met his birth family, and none of them were musical. But because he didn't know his birth family, he always thought, oh, we must be really musical then, and he just ploughed on with the music. And but it was just that he had all those possibilities available to him. Do you know what I mean? Whereas the rest of us, none of us were musical at all. And he was just really talented, and it wasn't genetic at all. But it was just the idea that you can choose your identity, or all these suppositions you make about yourself kind of form who you are. And, in this generation, people making families of choice, I just love that idea. So it was just something that was kind of in the ether, and it kind of took me back, because I wanted to straddle the ages in Glasgow, going back to the 80s and the heroin epidemic, which I believe you did the same trouble in Dublin.
Yeah.
Which is very unexplored. I mean, people talk about the gangsters and all that kind of thing, but they don't talk about that whole generation of missing people. And they used to have a mass here once a year to commemorate all the missing children, and it was just stowed full of parents and children, yeah, anyway, so we never really sort of talk about the sociological effect that had.
There's a whole lot of unexplored trauma, and I wonder if this is something that maybe because women are very conscious of that, the family dynamic of things and how everything affects your family. And there are these wonderful women who campaigned against heroin use and heroin being sold. And I just wonder whether that kind of, because there wasn't so much, maybe that like women's voices weren't heard as much, certainly in Ireland, about crime. Maybe that was why we haven't really kind of explored that whole side of things so much. Because
Well,
it's very much more, people being shot and
yeah,
money and glamour and all of that side of things. But,
power and money. But you never, it's coming because the people in the States have started to talk about the crack epidemic and the sociological effects that had on the black community there, and how it was very specifically aimed at the black community. And whatever happens there in crime always sort of slips over here. But I'm sick to death of hearing about drug lords and men with money and men with guns and fighting over corners and this kind of thing. And there's lots of stories that are not told, and it's a shame to. It's just a shame, and that is the point of feminist crime fiction: is we tell the stories that got lost. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
do you think that's sorry, that just really distracted me. I was just thinking about that and going like, yes, no, that is fascinating that we're telling these feminist underground stories. Uh, One question I wanted to ask you is about, how you're sort of, there's this idea of the tartan noir author, like there's a grouping of Scottish authors, because Scottish crime is so successful worldwide and so well respected, and has been for a lot longer, I think, than in Ireland. How do you feel about the tartan noir label? Do you sort of feel like, yes, these are the people who I want to be grouped with, or do you sort of say yes sometimes but not always, or how does that sit for you?
No, always. It's quite a lonely business being a writer,
Yeah.
and because it's silly. It's a silly name, Tartan Noir. I think it sort of it puts us all together, and everybody knows there's lots of different things in there. There's so many of us now, but they're such a nice bunch. We have a festival here called Bloody Scotland in September, and they do things like they get unpublished writers to do readings before the established writers get out and do their readings. It's just a really supportive community, and I think the tone has really been set that we're going to be collegiate, and we're going to be, and obviously we're all writers, we're all quite insecure and self-obsessed, but we could stretch ourselves, and every year a lovely woman called Jackie organises a protest about something, and we all go and protest with them. I just think those are really nice values, and that writing, we talk about it as if it's, we talk about it as if we're all Lord Byron, we're all of independent means. Nobody needs to make a living doing it. We all just think these things, and suddenly they appear on a page. It is a job, and it is a craft. And we are a guild. I would rather be part of a guild than just a wonderful one-off shooting star. I think people will come after us and rip us off and do our act and do it better. And that's exactly as it should be. It's supposed to keep moving on. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And I think I think the idea that there can be only one sort of Highlander construction of writing is a bit silly, or that it's in any way limited. It means that we get invited all over the world together as well. So a whole big bunch of us went to Canada for Tartan Noir. Stuart McBride, who's an absolutely brilliant writer, and a nutter. We were in a music shop in Vancouver, and I saw this gigantic steel drum, and I said, I'm going to buy that. This is at the start of a tour of North America together. And a good friend would say, you can't fit that in your suitcase. You can't get that. And Stuart McBride said, I think I'll get one as well. But that's lovely,
I think the crime writers in particular are really nice. Like, I know I'm totally biased, but there's a really supportive atmosphere in the crime community, isn't there? And I think,
and that is a choice. It's a choice any group of writers can make. In the 70s, I think there was a very kind atmosphere between poets all over Britain. It was very kindly, and it was collegiate, and it was compassionate, and there's no reason why it has to all be a competition. The arts are not a competition, and prizes are great because it means that you come to people's attention. But the arts are not a competition; they are a collective endeavour, really.
How do you feel when you win an award for a book? The first book of yours that I read, which is like probably 10 years ago, I think it came out about 10 years ago, was The End of the Wasp Season. And I remember reading it and just like being completely blown away by it. I actually read it again this week, even though I didn't really have time to do it because I really wanted to have that experience again of reading it. And I had forgotten enough of it that it was like reading it again for the first time. And it had the same impact. I remember getting to the end of it and feeling really like it was a kind of a gut punch ending, which is amazing because there's no trickery in it. It's a very powerful book. And you won awards for that book. Like you won the Theakston's Prize for it, which is not, I mean, obviously you've won awards for loads, but did you feel at the time this is a special book that will go on and win awards? Or did winning the awards make you think I've written a really special book? Or did it not make any difference to how you felt about it?
I just think I've tricked him again. Mostly what I think, I mean, I took my cousin who's a stand-up comedian to an event in LA, and it was the LA Times Book of the Year, and I didn't win, and Stephen King won. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he was mesmerized because he's a performer, and he said, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. This is the most shambolic piece of staged nonsense, because what would happen was they would read out the name of a really shy person, and then one of us would shamble up on stage and forget to mention his wife. So usually when you win prizes, usually when I win prizes, I'm just thinking, oh my God, they're all looking at me. And you know, having been on judging panels, you know that there are certain books that present themselves and the honour really is in the shortlist. And then beyond that, it depends on a whole lot of things, because you can't weigh a book and say this is 5% better than that book. You can't do that. It's about what seems zeitgeisty. You know, do they give a thank you speech routinely that insults all of the judges, which I do know some people do that. There's lots of different things that go on in choosing the final winner, but being on the shortlist to me is the really amazing thing. And then sometimes you don't win and you don't have to go up and sweat in front of everybody, because you know, an award ceremony with writers, especially if it's not being televised, it's quite a thing to behold.
I always think like when we're allowed out, terrible things can happen because we didn't get out that much. Like, everyone was going on about lockdown and how traumatic it was, and it really is about 5% different from my usual way of life, like my preferred way of behaving. So I feel a little bit guilty about that, and that, you know, this has actually been an okay year for me in some ways because I haven't really minded. But when you do get out and you're among your peers, and I think because it is very close and very collegiate, you know, everyone is listening to every word you say, and that you'll get away with nothing. And if you forget to mention someone or you say the wrong thing, it will come back to haunt you in the end. So,
and are you thinking that when you're on the stage?
the thing is, I always get really embarrassed because I always think, well, I know how it feels to not win an award, especially if you really want to win it. And there's often like a debut author or something who will be on the list. I know it means so much. I remember being that person and thinking, maybe this will happen. And so I always I always feel for the other people who haven't won. And I kind of want to say, like, it's not, you know, it doesn't actually make that much of a difference to me if I win. In a weird way, like, I love it and I'm very happy to win any award, obviously, like you are. But it doesn't change your life. You don't wake up and think, now I really know I'm doing a good job. You know, it's just it's a nice thing.
It does at first, though. I once thought I'd won and I didn't win.
Oh my God.
It was an Edgar, and people kept saying to me all the way through the sort of build up, I think you've won. And I was quite new, and I thought, oh, well, I must have won then. And then they didn't say my name, and I was so embarrassed that I didn't sleep for 2 weeks. I was so embarrassed.
It just plays your head, doesn't it, sometimes?
I just thought, what did you think? What were you thinking? You thought you'd won. You're so arrogant. And I didn't sleep for 2 weeks. And then sometimes I've won things and you are very aware that there are people in the audience who really would have wanted to win it. So you have to be gracious. You can't get up and say, oh, I don't care, because there are people who would give their eye teeth. You really have to be mindful of that. And, you know, and then other times if your confidence is a wee bit low, I mean, to be honest, during lockdown, I'm going out more. Because usually I just shamble about in pajamas for days on end, and I'm actually going out more now. I'm going out twice a day because you're only allowed to go out twice a day.
Well, once you're told you have to do something or you can't do something, then it becomes very important to you.
Yeah.
Have you found writing in lockdown? Has that been going well, or is that a struggle?
Well, yeah, I know it's been going fine actually. I've done loads and loads, and because I keep thinking, like today hasn't been a great day, and I've been stuck a bit. But actually, I've got loads done, and I've done some really good work. But I never remember that. Do you know what I mean? I always remember on the bad days, on days when you're not really making progress or not banging out pages. But actually, I have made progress. But I find it hard to remember the days when like 3 days ago when it was going really well. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Yeah.
Some of the work happens when you're not writing, and that's hard to
Yeah.
remember. Like that's a kind of maybe a thing that you learn that a bad day can be as productive in a weird way because you're not writing the wrong words. You haven't gone the right direction.
Yeah.
You can't write anything, but you'll
Yeah.
go in the right direction, and then you'll produce something.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about you. I do it on time. Like I'll give myself an hour, and if it's not going well, then I'll just be like, okay, scrap it.
Yeah.
Today. Whereas I think if you're trying to hit a word count, that can be really stressful and not.
That's a good idea. I might do that then. That's it. But you're always looking for fresh ways to approach it, aren't you? Because my big thing is I sit down every day and think I'm going to write an entire book, and then every day is a failure. And then every morning you wake up and you think, like a bad swimmer throwing their head back in the water, have another go. And I'm trying to enjoy it as well because it is, we are so lucky to get to do this full time. And I don't know, as I go on in my career, I'm aware that I'm not the best. Better have fallen by the wayside. Better have, had illness overcome them or responsibility overcome them or finances overcome them. And just to be grateful and enjoy it and make it a joyous thing and a sort of joyous journey that you take the reader on rather than for it to feel, onerous,
Yeah, I think you can always tell those books where somebody has set themselves a word count and gone grimly through it and, has plotted out the whole thing in a very kind of, right, on the 27th of November, I will be writing this scene. Like, to me, they don't live those books. You need books that have a little bit of kind of madness in them, maybe.
Yeah. I really believe that. Janice Galloway says that. She says if the writer is lost, the reader will get lost. But if the writer is writing to a plan, the reader will read to a plan. And I think that's very true. Although I do like a dum-dee dada book sometimes. Do you know?
I mean, I'm the same. I can read anything, and I quite enjoy reading something that's not how I would write it and thinking about why that is. And I mean, I love when you read a crime novel and you really enjoy it and you're not thinking about the technical side, because for us, I think we always feel the moving parts. And when you get completely caught up in a book and you don't see that anymore, then that's when you know, oh, this is a really good one. This is really good for me. But then maybe sometimes it's just where your head is. It's not necessarily the book. But with your books, it is always that they are brilliantly written.
You have to say that, but you never say that behind my back. I know that.
Oh no, I haven't. I'm bored on.
I'm just trying to start a fight with you.
Something I wanted to ask. I've been writing the same series for a decade now, very happily. Stepped outside of my comfort zone this year, and I've been writing a standalone, which was brilliant in loads of ways, but also terrifying and weird and unsettling, and a huge challenge. And you have a really amazing breadth of books like that. I can't kind of say, oh, you write this type of book. Like you have. How do you do that? Like, what is your kind of, is it just, I feel this book is the book that needs to be written next, or is it kind of a conscious thing not to be?
Well, you know yourself, you have to say to your publisher what you're going to do.
Yeah.
So quite often I don't really know, and I just sort of bullshit them at the time. And then as I'm saying it, I think this sounds quite good actually. But it is that feeling of, I can't wait to read that standalone then. Because that sounds great already, that if you're a wee bit, You know, if you're thinking, what even are words? I don't know.
That is exactly it. That is exactly.
Oh, that sounds good. I could lick the screen. I can't wait to read that.
Yeah, but it is like, I think there's something very freeing about saying, actually, do you know what? I'm just going to do this and see what happens. Um,
Yeah.
but it's terrifying. And how do you do that? What is this like something that, because you've done historical, you've done series fiction, you've kind of hopped around a little bit.
I have written comics. I have written plays. I've adapted Brecht this year, a Brecht play this year,
Wow.
which involved writing songs. I've done all sorts of things. And to be honest, I started just doing everything. And I started doing everything for money. So I had a column under a pseudonym in a newspaper here, and I was just banging out pages. It was Kirsty Farquhar Cox, who, I don't know if you remember, about 20 years ago, there was a thing where every newspaper had a column with someone who had a terminal illness.
Oh
But
my
Kirsty,
God.
do you remember that? Kirsty had cystitis, so it was her journey through cystitis. At one point, she went on this medication because I was thinking, oh, this is getting really tedious. Bernard Shaw said the thing about having a column is it's like standing under a windmill. You've no sooner dodged one blade than another one's coming. Having a column is really hard work. But at one point, she got this medicine, and it was spelled PHASEE and Fanny, right? So she got this medication for her cystitis, and people started phoning up the newspaper to find out where they could get this special medicine. So I started off just doing anything and having a go. Do you know what I mean? And I find if I'm writing a crime book, it's great to be doing another project because it keeps your approach to writing really fresh. And so, for example, writing comics made my books much shorter. In comics, you cannot have someone explain their motivation. You have to be able to see what's going on. When you're writing plays, it really makes you think about dialogue and keeping things very curt. And Brecht is incredibly wordy, actually. And apparently, it was because they had the theatre for a certain length of time. And it just makes you think about what you're doing. Do you know what I mean? If you're working in lots of different forms. So it's I would recommend it to anybody if you can if you're not afraid to fail, and I have failed at several of those things. Many of those things have been quite shit, to be honest with you. But I've made a film myself before, and it was never that big of a deal. Do you know what I mean? So I could do it again. But it's really interesting.
You have to be prepared to get it wrong, don't you? You have to know
Yeah.
you'll send in the first draft of whatever it is, and it'll come back to you. And maybe there'll be kind comments, but there'll be a lot in the middle of that email that is hard to read.
The shit sandwich.
Yes,
You're brilliant. It's shit. You're brilliant.
that's it. You've done an amazing job. It's shit. Thanks. I think is how my first lot of feedback for this book came. And my editor is amazing. She's brilliant at this kind of thing. But it's you have to kind of say to yourself, I know I haven't got this right.
Yeah.
The only way to get closer to getting it right is to get it wrong first.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. You have to make your clay before you can make your pots. Yeah. And I don't know about you, whenever I get edits back, I always say, thanks very much. They're very clear. But what I'm thinking is, you don't know me.
Resentment when you look at the edits first. I find like I get this really overwhelming sense of rage, and then I leave it for 2 days. And I come back and read it again, and I go, actually, those are really fair points. That's totally insightful and brilliant. And I'm really glad she said that. But the immediate reaction is throw the computer out of the window and just
you don't understand me or my music.
Exactly. You don't know how good I am, really. You just don't appreciate it. Do you get the 30,000 word slump? Do you get that? I've seen Ian Rankin talk about this. I think I know many authors who have it, where you get to your 30,000 words into your story, and it's really the point where you have time to write something else. So you could just bin it.
Oh.
Or you can keep going.
Well, I've never binned anything, but I think that is a natural beat point in a story. So I think you're then moving into the second act. So I think there is supposed to be a beat there, you know. But I've never binned anything and started all over again.
Okay. You're always going to finish whatever you start. That's kind of my rule for writing, actually.
But I do comb through things. So, I go back and change things and seed things and put in scenes. So if I get to say 30,000 randomly, I will go back and reread that obsessively and draw maps and things like that and work out what's in there.
Interesting. Interesting. I have a couple of questions. Io has asked, what is the most difficult to write, crime or true crime?
Well, true crime takes an awful lot of research, which is delicious. And also, I think crime fiction may be harder actually because you're looking for things. Whereas if you're writing true crime, you can always refer to all your research, But crime fiction, you're just kind of making it up, and then at the same time, you do have that Chandler freedom of you just have a guy come in with a gun if it's a bit boring.
um, Paula has asked, does Denise use any software like Scrivener?
No, I just use Word and I just print things up. What I do is somebody brought a slow motion, natural sort of like natural world camera to my house to film me. And what I think I do is I read it and I write notes and then I type in the notes. But what I actually do, apparently, according to this thing, is because it filmed you in super slow motion. Like when you see a frog jumping. What I actually do is I read the page and then I go like that. Then I go. Quite disgusting.
Oh, the things that we find out about ourselves. When I'm writing, my concentration face is this. And my husband absolutely, like he said to me before, it's like there's something wrong. It's like you can't write in public because it's terrifying. You just can't.
But there is something wrong.
I'm working. That's my concentration face. Another question is, Vanessa asked, do you plot or do you write the story organically? Which is interesting because we were just sort of talking about that. But how do you do you plot the first 30,000 words and then go back and go from there? Or do you just kind of go, I wing it?
Well, I actually wrote out a structure for this book and I'm like 10,000 words in and it's completely different. It's much more fun if you write organically, isn't it? I always think of it as falling off a cliff face first. It's a lot more exciting than walking down the stairs. And I think that communicates itself to the audience because what the books I really love are the books where you're reading them and you're thinking, what the hell are they doing? You don't know where they're going. You're surprised all the time. And even if you don't like the characters in it, you think, I'll just find out the answer to that question. And I think you can really tell that is written organically,
Yeah, absolutely. Niall is wondering who Denise's favourite authors are. Now that's a loaded question.
It's a loaded question and it's a very difficult question because it's different day to day, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I'll just say one writer who I'm absolutely loving at the moment and sigh whenever I think of her is Curtis Sittenfeld, who wrote Rodham, and she wrote a book recently called Help Yourself, which is just 3 short stories. Have you read it, Jane?
No, I haven't.
Oh, you'd love it. One of them is about sort of doughy Midwestern writer, and some people come and visit her, and they're making a documentary, and then she finds out it's really an advert for toothbrushes, or but it's brilliant about being an artist. It's just really, really interesting about making things and then being in the market. But I just think she's a really beautiful, clean writer.
Okay. One other question. Could Denise say something about the strong friendships in the Garnet Hill trilogy?
Well, Leslie in the Garnet Hill trilogy is my friend Betchy, and Betchy used to give people the book and say, "See if you can see who I am in that book." And then people would, after about 3 pages, they would say, "You're Leslie." She was Leslie, but I'm kind of. They were just based on the female friendships that I had and the friends who'd saved my life, and just sort of like those were friendships that I had and didn't see in books. When you read crime fiction at that time, the women were always solo, and they were always alone, and they didn't have best pals that they could just turn up with, or who they could phone up and say, I'm in real trouble, and they would come and get them. Do you know what I mean? I always think that's a measure. And so I really wanted to see that represented.
One of my problems one of the notes that I always get is your character doesn't have enough friends, and can we bring more friends into her life? And I always think, like, in theory, yes, but do I really want to stop telling this story so she can go and have brunch?
Yeah.
I'm having a really difficult time with this murder, guys. Anyway, back to work. Like, it has to be part of the character's life, doesn't it? You can't just insert them in there. It has to be part of the story you're telling.
Well, just make sure that the character can't drive, because that's a great boon to friendships.
Needing wheels.
Needing a ride somewhere, yeah.
This is a good question. How long does it take you to write a first draft?
Nowadays, maybe 6 months. But like you, I get a lot of notes, and my editor is brilliant and quite brutal. And the reason the books are, she changes the books really fundamentally with her notes, and I really appreciate that. So it takes maybe a year to get a book written and published, but the first draft takes somewhere between maybe 5 and 6 months, but they're really intensive months of worrying about word count and going back and changing things and kind of shambling around in pajamas. So really, really quite intense. I think
it won't happen.
Huh?
Thinking it won't all come together.
Yeah, it's just a leap of faith, isn't it? Yeah, and feeling inadequate every day.
We've run out of time. This has been so nice. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And thank you very much. And well done on the last end. It's brilliant.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me and cheering me. That was lovely.
Thanks.
Hey, Grace. Is that us?
Ooh, we're offline now, are we?
Oh, look at that.
What's that for?
My husband does that all the time. Watching telly, he'll say, Denise, look what I found in my pocket.